The thing that was announced today, though, is there's a pretty big shift in their App Store policy. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh yeah, I just read that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like a lot of people probably have experience buying something on the Apple App Store, maybe buying an app or whatever it is. Usually they charge they take a 30% cut of that. So Apple would if you sell something for $10, they would take $3 out of that sale. But pretty big change today. They've reduced that in half, basically 15%, which is a pretty big deal. At least up to I think $1 million, and I guess after you make $1 million in the App Store, I think it's still 30%. But that's great because vast majority of apps, they're going to make less than $1 million, and I think especially for those smaller companies, right? I think that's going to be a big deal for them. But no, it's a really interesting shift.
Well, the interesting thing too, I mean, obviously, as with any news story, it's obviously drawing criticism from the people who are making more than $1 million, right? Like, I think Spotify is complaining about it. I mean, Spotify has been in a pretty big battle with them in general, right? I don't know who else. There was a couple other names that were like criticizing this.
Well, the big thing, and I think actually somebody, it might have been, it was probably Andrea. I'm going to say Andrea because not that many people write into us, but I think she had asked about this whole thing that between Apple and I think Epic Games, right?
Yeah, it was her. Yeah,
that was a big kind of battle, and we can't tell you anything more about that. But it is part of this like. I think that was one event in a chain of events around this whole kind of, Apple versus the developers on their platform, right? And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess you'd say, because the beauty of the App Store is that, it's a distribution, right? So let's say you have an app idea. It's not easy, it's not simple, but you technically have a platform that you could reach billions of people potentially, right? Yeah. And there's value in that, right? I think nobody would say there's no value in that, right? Yeah. But the flip side of that is once you do find success, that becomes a pretty big deal, right? If you run a business, you'll know like 30% off your bottom line is a pretty big cut. So I think the whole thing with Epic was just sort of one in a series of other companies kind of like really fighting against this. And Apple is just so big now that I think there's also the government is kind of being involved. I don't know if anyone is kind of old enough to remember the days when Microsoft like basically was forced by the government to basically break off into smaller entities. I think Apple is a bit worried about that right now because again, like they're literally the biggest company in the world and the government could just tell them to stop doing something. So I think they're maybe also doing this to kind of get ahead of that, right? To say like, okay, well, we're not being unfair here. We're going to make some changes.
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, it's all around antitrust, right? And I feel like with Epic, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest thing with Epic was the in-app purchases and subscription stuff, right? So FDK, like if you release an app on Apple and you allow for in-app purchases, like in-app subscriptions, Apple takes a cut of that as well. So not only do they take a cut of the purchase of the app, but things that you buy inside the app itself. And the thing that it gets like where it gets really kind of icky is like, so for example, like YouTube and because Breton told me about this like a while back, and it's always been a thing where it's like if you subscribe to YouTube Premium on your web browser, it's like a certain price, and if you do that, you can access the exact same subscription you can on the phone. Yeah. Just the transaction, the part that you decide where to pay for it. But if you pay for it in the app, it's more to compensate for the cut that Apple takes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe Epic was the same thing, right? And then it gets a little bit crazier than that too, right? Because there's now this sign in with Apple, right? And I experienced this with one of my clients where we offered sign in with Facebook and sign in with Google, and then we've been pushing this app. It's been fine. It's been great. And then one time we made a small update and pushed it, and they said we rejected your app because you offer sign in with Google and sign in with Facebook, but you don't offer sign in with Apple or whatever, right? Yeah. And so that's where things get a little bit, because definitely. it's not like they're asking now just pay for our service. It's like we're forcing you to do certain
Yeah.
things a certain way, right?
Yeah, and you know, I think the thing that I think they're doing right though is again the fact that they are setting that upper limit. Again, I think they're approaching that as in a good way because some of these bigger companies are still going to complain. But
Yeah.
if they get into a court and kind of on some sort of antitrust thing with the government, like the optics of a company like Spotify complaining, that
Yeah.
that rakes in billions and billions of dollars, like they're not going to have a very good case, right? Versus
yeah.
if there's a bunch of smaller developers, right, that are coming, it's like I think that is a good example of where you have this really big company that has a monopoly that's pushing the small players down.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
they're really smart in doing that because, again, I think companies like Spotify and Epic, I'm not saying they don't have a case.
Yeah.
And there's two sides to that argument, but it's just that, it definitely, I think Apple is smart.
It's a very like you respect the way they went about it.
Yeah, the same
Like,
way with
whether or
signing
not-
with Apple, right? Like I think they're not just forcing it because they have a service. They are grounding that in that it is a better, more secure experience, right? Like
Yeah.
like you don't have to rely on companies like Facebook and Google that are productizing your data to sell ads, right? So I think there's always a business reason for them doing it, but I think they are successful because they're offering you like a benefit, right? There's a benefit
Right.
that is not just in their business interest.